views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Get ready for a game changer. Sarah Westall is bringing you Business Game Changers Radio. Mondays at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, Sarah will bring you leading experts, visionaries, and newsmakers who provide the best commentary on big issues and cutting-edge innovations. Sarah's 20 years as a business executive will help you think like an entrepreneur with expertise, energy, and attitude. Now here's your host, Sarah Westall.
Welcome to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall, and you're listening to Conscious Business Radio on the Transformation Talk Radio Network. We are going to talk about fintech and how that entire industry is being disrupted, and we're going to focus more on how payments are going to be going directly from consumers to retailers or merchants, or consumer to consumer, mobile payments between each other, and how that's going to affect the entire industry. Right now, banks collect a lot of money from every single transaction that goes on in our country. And now if you think about it, the low margin industries like grocery stores and retailers and distribution centers and all sorts of industries that are low margin are hovering around 2-3% margins. And when you start looking at what they're paying just to process the money they're getting from their customers, they're actually paying those processors and banks more money than what their net profit is. So they could double their net profit if this industry changed, or they could give that back to consumers. Okay, think about this. The industry currently is taking in about $250 billion a year on just the processing with all that middlemen in between. And with the new fintech and all the new cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and the software that lets you transfer money directly, well, especially with blockchains, it'll make it very secure. Then people could do payments directly to each other. People could pay the merchant directly. Sure, there would still be software that would be needed, but it would be a lot less expensive. We could give back almost $250 billion a year back to the U.S. economy. And how much would that really help our economy thrive? That would be a huge boom to our economy. And we need things like that. We need that money that's on overhead type activities that aren't contributing to Main Street, that aren't productive activities. Anything that's overhead, anything that's a middleman, anything like that is not productive activities in our society, in our economy. So you could give that $250 billion back every year to the American retailers and merchants and consumers, and that would be a huge boon to our economy. It would create jobs. It would do amazing things. That's what fintech is all about, is changing and it's completely disrupting the finance and the banking industry. And bankers know that. The big banks know that. And they're trying to get ahead of the curve and see how they can still maintain their margins and get control of that. And the entrepreneurs in this industry are trying to give people tools so that they can just go directly and do these things without all this middleman and save a lot of money. So this entire industry is changing. It's changing at lightning speed. And we're going to bring Jeremy Lazarus, and he's going to explain to us how this industry works and what's really going on. He owns a company called Payment Brokers, which is not one of the middlemen. What he does is he works with customers and he helps them figure out how to navigate this industry and set themselves up for the future in an open source environment. So as the software and the technology changes, they can change with it and stay agile. But he has literally saved companies millions of dollars. The big companies, he saves thousands, hundreds of thousands for the smaller companies. And he's going to explain how he does that, but also explain where this industry is going and why it's so disruptive to our country and how it can really help our country if things change around. So it's a fascinating interview. So let's get right to that with Jeremy Lazarus. Hi, Jeremy. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's right before Thanksgiving. Well, when this airs, it'll be right after Thanksgiving weekend, and people are probably ready to go to work at that point after eating too much. But I'm doing great.
Great to hear. And hey, I wanted to thank you for having me on today to talk. It's a really big passion of mine, and I really love getting an opportunity to just really be able to share it and engage with somebody that is really disruptive and working with folks in that kind of side of things.
Well, and that's what I try to do. I try to bring people what's really going on at the edge. What's the new stuff? How is that affecting? How's this change really affecting our society and business? But you are working in a pretty disruptive industry right now. And to some people, they might not realize how disruptive this really is to the whole banking system and the retail environment. But I want to talk about it, and you can really dive into some of the issues that are going on and give people an idea of how disruptive this really is and how it can be. But let's talk about mobile banking or mobile transactions. Can you explain what that is and why you got into this?
Yeah, I mean, just a little bit of background about me, maybe not so much personally, but I think, I was born a serial entrepreneur, and, I made my first money really young and sold my first company about 10 years ago. In another career life, I was one of the youngest to ring the opening bell at NASDAQ. So my background has been in the industrials and the manufacturing sector. But my passion has always been in entrepreneurship. And I've been in and owned several different companies, e-commerce, retail, some in the healthcare industry. But what I really love about it is technology, and more recently, I've become more of a disruptor in the payments industry as a CEO of payment brokers. And I think this is why it's such a good fit for the show and why we're talking here today, because I really have a desire to educate and shepherd entrepreneurs that are in the same spot or dealing with a lot of the technologies and things that are coming out, because so many of these companies, they really don't know what's going on behind the scenes of all the technology and all the real impacts it's having to their bottom line, to their competitiveness. It's a lot of exciting stuff. It's a lot of fun stuff. But it's also ultimately about what happens to their customers, how this is going to be adopted into the future, and the impact it makes to their ultimate bottom line. I think about a third of people don't even know that they have a choice in the technologies that are out. Some people are just, hey, I want to take payments. Another third make a decision but don't know which is the right choice. So this is really a chance for me to, I always say, pay it forward, right? Because we're in the payments business, but to really explain to people what's going on out there, so that they don't make the same mistakes that I made in my early entrepreneurial years and kind of into the future. I also really recognize that there's really a need for non-commercialized thought leadership in our space, like real passionate subject matter expertise, because I find that it's a lot of bank-driven, very, commerce-driven, biased direction that's been given about, hey, jump on this bandwagon of this new technology. It's going to make it so much easier. But it really, again, it impacts their bottom line. It takes away companies' effectiveness to be competitive and keep them agile for what's coming in the future. There's so many cool new things to jump into. So it's also this, unique, low margin business operating environment right now. We see a lot of companies trying to cut costs without sacrificing their day-to-day. And I think payments are exciting. I think there's some new things that people can adopt. And, there's a lot of cool new mobile technologies, right? The future of payments is becoming less and less physical, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but personally, I don't carry a lot of cash anymore. And I think the new generations, they don't know what pennies even look like.
Sure.
The physicality of money is going to change, right?
Well, I had my own business for 10 years, and I used to be so mad at how much the credit card companies used to collect. It used to make me angry because it didn't feel like they were doing much for the amount of money they were collecting. And in a lot of businesses, it equals what their whole net income is at the end of the day. And I just don't understand how one industry can be collecting so much off the top of everybody.
And it's like a low value silent partnership that, it adds value. I believe, making the customer experience or user experience easier and easier to make a decision quickly without having to, the old fashioned way, get out a paper check and write it out. And, it was like, hey, you can make a really quick, very simple decision. They've put all the technology in place to do that. But, it's even funnier is you're seeing the way people collect money, different. I mean, I live in Chicago downtown, and, there's a lot of musicians on the street, and they put their hats out, and, there's actually a joke. There's a musician that's right down the street, plays saxophone and has a square, right? He's like, hey.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It's a true story. I mean, people, he was done. He kind of stood up and people were clapping, and he had a cell phone and he had a square. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, because people just don't carry cash anymore, right? There's almost like too many ways to make payments anymore. We've kind of freed, and if you look at like mobile, right? We freed ourselves from cords and tethers in the computing world, right? We went from, the big boxes to, mobile, and then it was wireless, and now it's going into tablets and really the future. And I'm sure you've probably had other folks on the program to talk about where the future of computing is going. It's wearables, Google Glass, the Apple Watches and Samsung Watches, and now this rise of like 3D, Oculus, Samsung Gear VR. They're tracking everything. Fitbit, you got sleep trackers. So like this whole IoT or Internet of Things, telematics world, we're basically walking, talking, streaming beacons of wireless information.
But what bugs me is I can understand paying people for a service they provide, but they're taking such a large chunk of that, and these retailers can't afford that. So how, as we go to maybe Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, will we be able to eliminate some of those middlemen and just go straight from consumer to retailer?
Well, yeah, I mean, so, my whole kind of process in this for me is, look, now you're putting out this information, and they're able to use that information. Big data is kind of collecting all of this data as to how you transact and where you are and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis with all these devices and all this new technology. And they're turning that into, they're monetizing it, right? We all know
they're making a killing off of it, right? I mean, that's
literally.
All. Yeah. So instead of going the other direction, they're just adding another layer of huge cost to people.
Yeah. And I think, so now you're embedded, all this embedded wireless technology, right? RFID and NFC, near field communication. People are tapping their phones to make payments. All of that cool, very simple technology comes at another layer of cost, another silent partnership over and above the Visa.
Yeah, because Visa's one transaction.
Visas and MasterCards of the world.
Yeah, because Visa's one transaction, and this is another transaction fee.
Right, and there's a bunch of middlemen in between. So I always, people who are unfamiliar with kind of the value chain of people that get paid when a payment's made, you've got what's called an acquiring bank, and then you've got an ISO, an independent sales office, and above them you have, the card brands, the Visas and MasterCards of the world. An ISO is just a reseller for a much bigger acquiring processing company, right? So now you have a sales organization that gets in touch with, a company that can layer technology, what we call an ISV or integrated software vendor. And so everyone in between there gets paid.
Well, it's starting to sound like healthcare. Our healthcare's gone up so much because of all the middlemen. It's like, that's why people like cash. But
but cash is going away. I mean, it's the future,
well,
right?
I understand. So how do we fix this whole industry so it's not turning into healthcare where, more people make money? There's a larger amount of money made and the people just simply doing the transactions for you than the actual person selling the product.
Yeah, but the problem is we're adopting the technology for other reasons. I mean, it doesn't end at, these like tap to pays. Right now it's biometric, right? iPhone came out and, their iPhone 5S, right? And that was it was a major game changing moment because people started using the thumbprint sensor. So now in biometric, and they said, oh, cool, now we have this new layer. And Apple at this point has partnered with the big banks of the world and said, hey, we're not going to charge you to use Apple Pay, but this is the adoption of the technology so that once you become accustomed to it, they just put a new biometric sensor in the new MacBook Pro, right? So now you can actually use your thumbprint to order online. I mean, and it's great, right? Everybody's so concerned about security. You have EMV, which is the new chips that are in all the cards here, right? So people are like, hey, I want to keep myself secure. And this is just like a new layer of security. So like, hey, it's great. It doesn't cost. It's the same price point. But what you're going to see, I mean, this is really the path of the technology, is Apple Pay and various others that are in the biometric side are going to add another layer of cost. At some point, it becomes another part of the value chain that you have to feed in order to make a transaction go through in their environment, right? In a secure environment. But look, there's a ton of apps. You use them every day. OpenTable, Grubhub, restaurants making payments. They take huge percentages. Sometimes 20, 30% of the transaction as a value-added solution provider that has embedded payments in. So, I mean, this is the challenge of I want to be in the know. I want to have the technology. I have to because my customers are demanding to use it, but I'm ultimately going to be responsible for the end bottom line cost of it. I mean, touch wasn't pioneered by Apple. This came out 10 years ago by a company called Solidus. It was called Pay by Touch. I actually saw it for the first time about 10 years ago at a grocery store. And they had this, I mean, nobody was lining up to sign up for it, right? Because it was like going to get your mugshot and fingerprints taken.
Yeah, nobody trusted it.
Nobody wanted to do it. But Apple Pay really kind of set itself up by having this, hey, we're going to use this to secure your phone and your data. And it was really simple. We already have everything. So, hey, this is just another layer of security. And people immediately adopted it, and it's off to the races. Everybody wants it. The problem is there is a cost to it, right?
And it goes all to the retailers, right? I mean, so
yeah, I mean,
all of our retailers,
it all lands at the retailers.
And Absolutely. They're all getting killed already. So we're just like, we're really killing these businesses. Not the big companies, it's all the little mom and pops everywhere and all the little places.
Yeah, and so here now you have facial recognition, iris scanning, and at some point like DNA, right? I hope I'm kidding about that, but it's not far fetched. They even have like audible signal frequency.
Well, they'll have the built-in. Well, you'll have the what do you call it? The embeddable things into your body, so that they can know that it's you.
Yeah, so that's again, it's the future of wearables. Paper's going away, plastic's going to even go away at some point. The cards will be taken over by the devices we wear, and really even our own bodies. And guys won't wear, even have wallets anymore. Purses will be around. So
well, yeah, you still have to bring your lipstick, right, or your whatever else you got.
But the future of electronic wallets and information and the combination is really lethal for small business. But to make it more confusing, now they're going to change the currency itself, right? Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies and all the technology behind it called blockchain. It's opened up a whole new world of possibility, but I also think it shares a similar fault with what central banking is now seeing, which is it's really not responsible or accountable to any government or the people themselves. So there's some major hurdles there, but I see it as really the bridge to the future, and it's a huge bridge to cross. I mean, the future is this.
Well, and I'd like to see peer-to-peer, because then it would eliminate a lot. Then it would eliminate all these middlemen. You would have a simple transaction maintenance thing. You still would have somebody in the middle that helps do the transaction, but it would be significantly reduced. And we could get, the more you have all these middlemen in between and these layers, the more it's going to cost. And it's the same with you can't drive efficiency. We can't have higher production, and people can't thrive if we have a whole crap load of middlemen. I know you're a middleman. I know that, but you know what I'm saying. I mean,
and I agree with you, right? I my business is purely that. How do we get you in a position to be hardware and software and processor agnostic? I don't know another word to use other than that, because I think a lot of people pick a path, they get embedded in this technology, they train all their employees, and it's hard to decouple them from the decision they make, because then they have to retrain everybody and they have to kind of wean themselves off the technology. It's extremely hard to do.
But it's extremely expensive. I mean, it really can be 80, 90, 120% of your net income. Depending on the, grocery store, it really could be for a typical grocery store.
Well, I mean, and that's why I said in this really low margin environment where literally everything's being commoditized because you can buy it on eBay from a guy who only wants to make 3 points of margin, it becomes extremely challenging. And the Amazons of the world, who still haven't posted a year of profit.
But that's why.
We built it that way. I mean, we built that culture around payments. But there's so many silos to connect for this true like omni-channel thing that everybody wants. But ultimately what lies in between that, today and what we want to happen in the future with this omni-channel blockchain driven Bitcoin, style environment, there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of uncertainty. And I think for companies that are not in the know, there's long-term indebtedness to these credit card processing agencies. And what you said, silent, low-value partnership from payment solution providers, when ultimately all you're trying to do is get paid.
Well, for those that haven't heard, I did a interview with the original founder of blockchain. He actually put the patent out before the Satoshi Mako or whatever his name is, just Japan. That's not his real name, obviously.
You did a much better job of his name than I did.
Well, thank you. But so I have the original, or I have the first interview I've ever done on media on my site. But it's a really interesting talk about the security issues and how there are some solutions to make it completely impregnable, impenetrable. How do you say that? You cannot penetrate it.
Yeah, you can't. Well, I think that's it. But the problem there is, I think the falsehood of that it can't be. I mean, there has been people whose what they call e-wallets have been breached, and you can't get it back. There's nobody to go after. There's no way to chase it down. There's no traceability to it. It's like losing cash, right?
But the blockchain itself can't be.
Yeah, the blockchain itself at this point hasn't been. Yes. And I know that there's a lot of talk about the impossibility, but I mean, that's today, right? So I think there's definitely a future there. I really believe in what I call the rails that is blockchain. I mean, it's very stable, and I feel like there is a great future behind that. To bring in people that can really disrupt the payments industry. Our whole goal as our company is to build up our own payment solution as well that gets out of the middle of all of this interchange and Visa, MasterCard labels that everybody's so familiar with, because everybody's driven towards one thing, and that's rewards. You see all of these, Blue Diamond, and I get, 3% cash back. It costs the merchants money to do it. And meanwhile, people are financing the money. Visa, MasterCard's making percentages on both ends of the spectrum. So it's extremely challenging to get people out of that, miles and points mentality to really reduce costs overall, because it ultimately costs the end consumer, right? Because all they do is raise prices. Merchants aren't going to lose money. They're going to find new ways to make money. So it's really extremely difficult. But going back to this, embeddedness, Amazon and eBay, 21.5%. Grubhub is like 15%. And these companies, payment companies like Square and PayPal and QuickBooks, they're making it easy. So people are like, I get a real simple bill. It's just a flat 3%. People don't realize the actual true cost behind it. They're just marking it up and they're like, well, it's simple. So with simplicity comes cost. And then these companies are buying up all the competition to not only embed themselves, like Square bought Caviar, which is very much like Grubhub or Uber Eats. You know, they deliver from restaurants locally. First Data, which is a large on both sides of the big data side and also the credit card processing world. They went public this year. They also bought a POS system. So what ends up happening is you get embedded into their system and you're stuck with them for life. There's no getting out of it. And so once they recognize that you really adopted their technology, they slowly 1 basis point, 5 basis points, 10 cents here, they really nickel and dime you into a 3 to 5% silent partnership.
We need to take a short break and we'll be back in a moment.
Tune in to Mainstream Metaphysics Radio to harness your connection with the universe to effect change for optimal success and happiness. Named one of the country's top psychics, Eve now brings her insights and gifts to this weekly hit call-in show, joined by visionaries, leaders, and gifted others, but mostly you. Jot it down, Thursdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Did you know that all of the shows on the Transformation Radio Network are available as podcasts to stream or download?
Really?
Check us out. Go to transformationradio.fm. We have business shows, spiritual shows, energy healing shows, and pretty much everything in between. Something for everyone, guaranteed to inspire, educate, and transform. We are transforming the world, one listener at a time.
Have you wanted to make more money without working harder or more? Maybe you've tried new ways to bring in extra income without success. Hi, my name is Deb Acker, and in addition to being the host of Truth Talk Radio, I'm an intuitive life coach and energy healer. I clear energy blocks to all areas of life, including abundance. Did you know many times we have an invisible income ceiling? So no matter what we do, our income never goes up, or if our income does go up, we experience an unexpected expense that negates this. How much would it be worth to significantly increase your income or even have unexpected income show up? When I was in the corporate world, I used these techniques to increase my income by tens of thousands of dollars without changing my work routine. In fact, I worked even less, and I now help clients do the same. If this resonates for you and you're truly ready for abundance in your life, I'd love to gift you with my pattern identification session. Simply contact me on the contact page of my website, DeborahAcker.com. That's DeborahAcker.com. And let me know you heard about this gift through Transformation Talk Radio. I look forward to connecting soon.
Are you ready for a game changer? Sarah Westall is bringing you Business Game Changers Radio. Sarah brings you leading experts, visionaries, and newsmakers who provide the best commentary on big issues and cutting-edge innovations. Sarah's 20 years as a business executive will help you think like an entrepreneur with expertise, energy, and attitude. Tune in to Business Game Changers Mondays at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Do you want to achieve your goals? Do you want to strengthen relationships with others? Do you want to improve your financial status? Colette Marie Steffen is partnering with Mark Kettenbach to bring you an energetic upgrade online experience. Unfold and develop your full potential. Visit energeticupgrade.com today for more information. That's energeticupgrade.com.
Welcome back to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall, and we are talking with Jeremy Lazarus. But before we get back into that interview, I want to remind you where you can get my show. You can get it on my website, of course, at sarahwestall.com. All my past shows are there, over 130 shows now, I think. Each show, I write up an article on the industry or the topic that I'm talking about, along with charts and data and all sorts of information on that particular topic. So you can get a lot more information than what you get in the interview. At least it's data and charts that are pretty interesting. I also want to remind you that you can listen to my show at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on WBLQ, which airs in New York, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. And it also airs 7 days a week on Transformation Talk Radio. Now we're playing at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesdays on the Global Star Radio Network satellite. So that's available all across the country. I'm really excited about that because it has very good other shows on it, very popular shows. And you can hear it nationwide, which is really fantastic. And now I have a channel that I put up on YouTube. So I have a lot of my more popular shows that I'm putting up on YouTube. So you can get to that as well. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel or subscribe to my newsletter. I have that goes out about twice a month. I don't put out too much email. Nobody wants too much email. So twice a month, you'll get my newsletter. But let's now get back to our interview.
And that's really the direction it's heading. And it's unfortunate because it's an impossibility for somebody who just started their company. Look, I'm a serial entrepreneur, right? I've started several companies, but let's just say you're a restaurant. You got into it because you're a chef. You're passionate about cooking. You like to feed people. So that's what their whole business was, developed around. A year later, you got to be an expert in investment, capital, and finance, and insurance, and purchasing and logistics, right? And the most important thing to them is getting paid. So taking payments is on the top of that list, but they have to know everything about POS systems, ordering systems. How do they connect their online community to it and track their inventory? So at the end of the day, making the right decision to go down a path that can be the more open source solution so you can adopt things like Bitcoins without a huge headache really needs to be done by somebody who can walk them through it versus, hey, just go to your bank and talk to your bank. Like people walk into, Harris Bank and they'll say, I just want to take credit cards. Harris Bank doesn't process credit cards. They go to an ISO. So now you're paying, Harris, and now you're paying the ISO, and that ISO might use an MSP, a master service provider. And then that MSP goes to an acquirer like First Data. And then, First Data processes through Wells Fargo. Every single one of those people is taking a cut.
Well, how do we get rid of, because they just keep bringing up the fee to the point where these retailers and all these people that take credit cards are stuck with this 3 to 5% fee eventually. It's all buried in the background. Everybody in the country doesn't realize that this is what's going on. It's kind of like healthcare where there's just this huge middleman expense and it's crushing retailers. How do we keep that from happening? I know that's why the whole cryptocurrency, I know that's why blockchain is so exciting for so many people, but what are you doing to help bring that along? And if the big bankers all get in control of cryptocurrencies, then they're just going to keep their same margins. They're not going to want to lose all their margins. So how do we gain freedom in that industry so that people, the merchant and the person buying, it's just a simple transaction between those two? Why can't we just get everybody out of it except those two people?
Yeah. So navigating that is extremely challenging, right? Because you have to be an expert at knowing who to go to cut out all the middlemen, acquirers directly. There are 42 acquiring banks in the U.S. that are the actual end processor, and connecting what I will call agnostic hardware and software solutions to it keeps you in the ability to move around to who has the best available technology at the time, the best security at the time, and ultimately the lowest cost provider at the time.
Well, there should be no reason. There should be no reason to have any more than one in between with the way the technology, how advanced technology is now. And as we move forward, all these other layers is all just BS because there's no reason to have any more other than one. You still need to have somebody do the transaction. But beyond that, maybe two if you somebody's storing your blockchain versus a transaction. And that's it.
Well, so my advice has always been, don't make decisions to go with a solution set that is ultimately locked down from any third parties, right? So the more open source you stay, the more ability you have to integrate at low cost, the more ability you have to make changes in the future as companies like First Data, they went public, they have shareholders to answer to now. So in doing that, albeit they were, purchased for billions of dollars and had private shareholders to answer to, today it's a matter of, do they need to raise prices to meet their quarter, right? I mean, so there is a thought process here that you have to be able to move and have freedom to choose who you want at any point. And what's unfortunate is people are making decisions to go with technology that's embedded. And it's hard to know the difference. So having somebody, like myself or others in the industry who can kind of navigate people through that environment is really the only solution today. I think the future is these new, technologies or new payment forms or new currencies. But I think people should start to brush up on what's coming, knowing what's coming, knowing the regulations behind it. But we're watching from the sideline with kind of our hands tied as billion-dollar, back alley treaties are being signed with blockchain development payment companies and big banks. They get it. They see what's coming.
Yeah, they're going to be on top of it, and we'll just be they're very smart. They know they want to skim money off every transaction. That's their game. They know it. They talk about it. That's what executives talk about. How can we make money off every transaction in the country and get as much as we can off every transaction in the country? That's their game.
Like healthcare, brokerage, right? And that is why what we do is so disruptive, because nobody's ever brokered it. Everybody just kind of picked a path and kind of put their blinders on and said, what we offer is the best. And that's not the case. So I think it's important that people look at it across the entire playing field and make decisions 5 years out, because that's what it's going to require, and start to slowly integrate in things like Bitcoins that can help them migrate into it if that ends up being what I'll call the winning horse in the payments industry. We don't know. There's so many of them.
Well, what do you do to keep people open source? Because that has to be the way to go. Otherwise, you really will be locked down.
So, a case in point, a small restaurant buys a POS system, signs a 5-year contract. The POS system's owned by a processor. So they know what they're ending up with, and they end up in 6.5% of their bottom line. And it's a restaurant in a small, urban area. They're not going to make money doing that.
I have stress just thinking. I've stressed just thinking about a 6.5%. They get nailed. These poor people that are trying to make a living, and they just get gouged. I don't think the everyday person understands that.
No, they don't. And then last year, October, regulations changed. They're like, well, you need new hardware now. Well, why? Well, you have to accept EMV, or if you're not in compliance, you end up paying for chargebacks that you would normally be able to combat. And now you can't because you're not in compliance. So, and I have, clients that I work with that own chains of restaurants that have run into, people came in, they had a party, they charged the entire thing back. I have their driver's license, a picture ID with their signature, and them signing the bill. And still, because I'm not in compliance, I had to take on the liability. In the same light, if you get hacked and you don't have the latest and greatest technology within compliance, PCI and EMV, you end up taking the full liability of those transactions and all the fraud that comes with it. So I think what you're going to see now is it's not just a payment game anymore. You have to be ahead of the curve on the technology and the security side. And you're a restaurant owner. That's why I said, you got into this to cook, not to be. So it's hard. You almost have to have somebody who's ahead of the curve and has the knowledge behind it to shepherd you through making the right selections, making the right choices. On our side, it's always been, what hardware provider is not signing these back alley treaties with processors? So you can switch, because then you can pin them against each other, very much like LendingTree or various others in the market who are aggregators of everybody. So you can make a decision for yourself. And then, knowing which path to go down, making it really simple, right? I mean, everybody wants the newest, latest, greatest, but sometimes that takes you down that path.
Because they get you the shiny special thing and then you're sucked in. Yeah. And so you really need to be planning for what the new technology is coming and planning for not costing you so much in the background, because they're just getting killed. I don't know a single astute, I teach entrepreneurship at the University of Minnesota Carlson School. And it's one of the things I teach students is that is a huge expense. You have to be really planning for that. And I don't know any astute business person that hates that. They'd rather all do cash. And that's why cash is the black market, because they don't want to have to be tracked. They don't want to have to deal with all these percentages. So that's why Bitcoin is so attractive to these people if they can do person to person transactions. I know there's some of that technology coming up as well. Have you looked into that?
It's here.
Yeah, how does that work?
I've been to the conference, the most recent conferences all over on payment technologies, and I've actually sat in on Bitcoin conferences and starting to get a better feel for how that's developing. The unfortunate part is the rest of the world just doesn't know, and they're afraid of it because it's not that easy to just grasp the concept of.
Yeah,
so I think when somebody really cracks the code of making it bite size for, a guy who owns a truck shop or, a repair shop, to be able to just, hey, I just plug it in and somebody can pay with the Bitcoin and it goes in my bank as US dollars. That's going to be the winner. And those technologies are coming, but I think there's still a big bridge to cross there. And even then, I think people want to be able to spend it. And again, trying to follow a new currency market to look at these huge volatile swings that have happened in Bitcoins is not attractive.
Well, it's not. People don't like to sit and follow that. They just want to, like you said, the restaurant owner just wants to sit and make their food. They don't want to have to deal with this stuff. And that's why it's a lucrative business, because these people don't care. They know they don't care. They know they're confused, and it is just a great business to go after.
Yeah, it's again, like I said, it's unfortunate, but you just got to keep them agile, keep them in the camp of knowing what's coming so that they can make decisions around it and be able to make moves without making major impacts to their day-to-day operations. Because that's what really fails in that business is, hey, switch out all your hardware. They can't retrain everybody and rethink of a new system. Sage is a great example. Companies put in multi-million-dollar ERP systems for manufacturing firms, and they're embedded. And case in point, a textile manufacturing company, $100 million in transactions every year, was using this ERP system. And I met with the CFO and we sat down and kind of talked about their whole payment technology strategy for their retail and how they transact between their B2B commerce world. And, it's $100 million at 4.5%.
Oh God.
I mean,
yeah.
And textiles are heavily commoditized. So he's like, it's eating into 40% of my gross profit. It's unbelievable.
That's what I mean. It's a huge percent of their gross profit, their net income. So if it's 72, you were saying 72 billion worth of transaction fees in the United States, but that's just the original, that doesn't count some of the other back end stuff. It doesn't count the software on top, which, integrated software vendors. So you'll hear this terminology, ISVs. There was a statistic, I think it was even yesterday I read this, that they're going to make $4.4 billion in payments in 2021. So that's in addition to what we call interchange, which is the fees that are charged by the card brands to the acquirers, right? So this is all public domain. You can go out on Visa and MasterCard's website, and they didn't make this easy. These are multi-page documents that goes into card types that they take. Visa and MasterCard have 300 plus card types, just the two of them. So when you start talking about, it's very difficult to figure it out, how much they're actually making.
It's not like you can't tell by looking at a card which one of those categories it falls under. and you can't charge the customer for the fees. It's illegal. For you to go back to your customer and say, hey, if I'm going to take a credit card,
I know that's illegal. What is that?
Yeah.
How can that seems like
this is regulation.
That's unconstitutional. I think to make that illegal has to be unconstitutional.
And some states recognize that, and there's a lot of back and forth on that discussion right now. And if
that's
you
crazy.
Look at this, but I mean, American Express. I mean, they're the most expensive of the group, because they give the most rewards and loyalty points and, really ultimately the best of the best, but the merchants pay for it. And I know you've been to places that say, we just don't take American Express. American Express went after these companies to say, you can't tell people that they can't use that form of payment. I mean, so it's unbelievable what's really happening with the card brands.
You have to accept it, and you have to pay more. That should be unconstitutional. I agree. But okay, so you got 72 billion just in this is 2014 numbers. And then we got another 4.4 billion. Is there other numbers on top of that?
Sure. So the independent sales offices. So interchange is what happens between the acquirer and the card brand, and then what's called an ISO or an MSP. So an independent sales office, which I'm just going to say is ultimately just a reseller for the actual credit card processor themselves, what we call an acquirer. So they just add a markup to it. And so you hear it as cost plus or interchange plus.
How much is that typically? What percentage?
They can decide for themselves. So,
could it be 1 cent? Half of what Visa's charging? Maybe?
It could be 1 cent. It's usually a percentage and a transaction fee. So they'll charge, 1 basis point all the way upwards of 2 or 3% in addition to the fees. And they can charge 1 cent. They can charge 50 cents. It's really up to the ISO.
So if we were guessing, if the $72 billion is going to, this is 2014 numbers, $72 billion going to Visa, MasterCard, American Express, how much is going to the software resellers?
Well, so now you have an ISO, and then above them, ISOs build relationships with integrated software vendors. So it's really just another layer on top of that. It's honestly, it could be almost double in some cases what Visa MasterCard is charging.
So if Visa MasterCard is getting 72 billion, 2014 numbers, they could be getting 150 billion.
Yeah, especially with risk, right? So now it's really a determination by the independent sales office what the risk level is. And they have underwriters that specialize in this that look at risk as a whole. But
so we're talking 225 billion to 250 billion when you add all that stuff up every year being sucked out of the economy just for transactions. If we could get that down to just software, just a basic thing where the retailer is dealing with the customer directly, we could give back almost $200 billion back to our economy every year for people who are doing something meaningful in the economy versus just skimming off the top.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's up to the retailer. I mean, where they take the transaction is what matters most. The technology that they stand behind, and unfortunately, what they use themselves, right? I mean, if you're using, Grubhub yourself, you're forcing other restaurants into this position where they have to pay 15%. And the payments made through it. Now, new technologies, like OpenTable, I use it all the time. And now you can pay your bill through OpenTable, so you can book your restaurant, which the restaurant already has to pay fees to have them market your company. And on top of that, they're now taking payments for them. So everybody's really trying to get in the payment space because it's, again, it's a silent partnership. They don't really add a lot of value other than making the transaction.
Well, they can make money on every transaction, and that's really a great way to make money. It's a great business opportunity, and they see it. Yeah, it is. It's a great bit. But at the other end, the retailers and the people who aren't as sophisticated are getting really hosed. So, yeah. and customers don't understand the whole process at all. No, most people don't even realize there is a fee.
Yeah. And you've seen it You go into a bodega or grocery store or whatever, small little convenience store, and you see the sign and it says minimum transaction $10. And, we did a ton of homework on this because I'm like, well, why do they all have that? Even if they have really low cost processing, the minimum you're going to pay is at least 10 cents a transaction. And I'm talking bare minimum.
Yeah.
And that's if nobody's marking it up. Now, a small little bodega doesn't have the volume to go out and get processing that makes sense. Now, I know everybody's like, yeah, but it's probably good for business, right? Everybody has credit cards. No one has cash. Now they have to spend $10. So good for them. But the reality is, if they, sell a pack of gum for $1 and they have to pay 10 cents, plus, whatever markup. So let's call it 15. That's 15%. You can't.
Yeah, 15%. Yeah, 15% of their, but let's say their cost of the gum and the cost of everything they have, their probably end of day is almost 15%. That's why I was saying you're taking 90% of their net income.
Yeah, and so all they do to combat that is either raise prices or create, stipulations like, minimum order $10. So, it's affected it that much that people recognize it on a daily basis. They just don't see it.
They just don't know why.
And so now you see this little tricky thing, and I see it with utilities and, if you have an apartment, they even sometimes take credit cards, a convenience fee. And so it ends up costing the customer or consumer level more because they can't tell what kind of card they're taking. So they just bucket it all together and say, just charge you a flat $5 no matter how big the transaction is, when the real cost is like $2, but they just don't know because they can't really
that's why
the industry.
Well, that's like when I'm paying my son's college tuition, I never play with a card because they charge us a big convenience fee. And so I always just do a direct deposit because a convenience fee on $10,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah. So on that note, I think there's some really cool stuff coming with money transfer, right? So I think there's going to be a shift where people start to recognize money transfer, like Venmo, and there's a bunch of them. But money transfer will become big.
Well, and that's direct from consumer to seller. That's what I love.
Yeah, bank to bank.
Bank to bank, and then you really save money. You still have the person doing the software that you have to pay in the middle, but that's it.
Yeah, but it's nominal.
Yes.
It's nominal. There's, in the
it's
ACH
reasonable.
world,
it's more in line with every other business.
Yeah, but the other thing is there's no recourse, right? So once they have the money, there's really ultimately no way for you to go back and get it, short of going to court.
Well, I guess I would trade that. As a retailer, I think I would trade that. You don't use that service very much.
Yeah, as a retailer you would, but as a consumer, you might not.
The consumer doesn't know, doesn't understand it. Yeah. They don't. They're not
I think everybody's also.
That's why they made it illegal to let consumers know, because they know if it's illegal, consumers won't get. They just don't get it.
Yeah, they won't want to help the business out by stopping at the bank and getting cash.
Well, but they don't. It doesn't affect them. They don't know that it affects them. And even the small people, even if it's just a few of you paying cash, it's not going to help you because everybody else is still paying cards.
No, and merchants are smart to this, right? Place I get my haircut, they're like, pay with cash, we give you 2% cash back.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's all the time we have today. I apologize, but you can listen to the whole show on podcast, or I'm also playing the whole show on satellite at 5 p.m. on Wednesdays. You'll be able to hear the whole show there as well. And of course, you can go to my website and see the article that accompanies this and hear all the other shows that I have going on. So for now, I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
You've been listening to Business Game Changers with host Sarah Westall. Tune in each Monday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, as Sarah brings you leading experts, visionaries, and newsmakers who provide the best commentary on big issues and cutting-edge innovations. Sarah's 20 years as a business executive will help you think like an entrepreneur with expertise, energy, and attitude. Tune in Mondays at 12 noon Pacific Time and learn more about Sarah at sarahwestall.com today.
Did you know that all of the shows on the Transformation Radio Network are available as podcasts to stream or download?
Really?
Check us out. Go to transformationradio.fm. We have business shows, spiritual shows, energy healing shows, and pretty much everything in between. Something for everyone, guaranteed to inspire, educate, and transform. We are transforming the world, one listener at a time.